It's Democrats 2-1, and that's even in Wisconsin and Florida. So even though that's a certain percentage of the votes, with many more to come, it is an indicator. But certainly, the Biden campaign is not going to skip over the Midwest and some of these states, because in the end, we're really looking at a few states and a few voters in those states. That's a play.
And Rick, you talked about campaign events before. I wanted to touch on the debate over the debate now. The second debate is not happening now. It looks like Trump will be holding a rally. Biden will be doing a town hall here on ABC. Who wins politically here?
Well, I think there's some high-level strategy being played, because you saw in the space of a few minutes yesterday, the Commission on Presidential Debates saying it has to be a virtual debate, the president saying, I'm not going to show up, and then Joe Biden saying, you know what, I'll find another place to be, and that will be a town hall on ABC News next Thursday night. If Joe Biden is leading in this race, not exposing him to another debate is probably a good move. Maybe the American people win if we don't have another debate as messy as last week's. We're seeing President Trump trying to revive talk about a debate. I think it's likely that we're not going to have a debate next week, but more likely than not, if the president's health is strong enough, there will be a debate the week after that, the final debate.
I do think that democracy loses because you want to see them contrasting on the issues, not an infomercial that each of them can do. And even though, that it's true that people who got a headache from the last one might not want to see it, we really have to rethink what's going on here, because the public needs to be better informed. And in debate, it was a great way to do it throughout history.
Absolutely. If you look at these debates, which you first saw the race, they lasted for hours. I think we have that attention span. We can don't go away. We're not done with it to the end of the day.
Thanks, Terry. And with the election fast approaching, we want to take a closer look at some of the changes and issues with voting this year. The newest problem is the so-called naked ballot. Ballots not properly sealed in a required secrecy envelope. For the first time, a critical battleground state says it will invalidate those ballots, raising the stakes in an already heated election. Senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer has more.
16 states sent secrecy envelopes to voters, but Pennsylvania is the only state that will now disqualify ballots that arrive without one and give voters no way to fix it. Republicans say this is for ballot security. Where did this idea even come from?
The idea was to protect the voters' private ballots as it's being extracted. Well, now there's equipment, and there's also sort of the way that you do the process that can protect the voter regardless. But it is not a required element to count a ballot, or it's not required for eligibility of the voter.
Why do you think the state Supreme Court upheld that requirement?
Well, in their law, it is more specific than a lot of laws around the country, and it does say that the ballot will not be accepted if that's not present. In my mind, it's not a fatal flaw.
In court documents, the Trump campaign argued the secrecy envelope is essential to ensure the secrecy of absentee and mail-in ballots and to prevent fraud. But Democrats say the extra envelope is a vestige of the past and has nothing to do with ensuring a valid vote. We're trying to make sure everybody can vote. And if you are afraid of people voting, then you're afraid of people being able to make a choice about your record. State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta from Philadelphia says enforcement of the secrecy envelope rule in his state is stoking unnecessary concern over mail-in voting. People weren't sure for a long time whether or not they were going to drop off their ballots at a drop-off location. We had the issue with Trump encouraging people who aren't poll workers to just show up at locations to try to intimidate voters. So there's a lot of confusion in there. This is not about Democrats or Republicans or independents. This is about whether or not we're going to have a functioning democracy. What I've said to people, if you're not frustrated, you're not paying attention. And that frustration is particularly warranted in Pennsylvania, one of the most hotly contested battleground states. President Trump won there by just 44,000 votes in 2016. About one estimate, guys, 100,000 naked ballots could be tossed out in November because of this new requirement that the state Supreme Court put in place. That's a big deal for Democrats. They outnumber Republicans by mail-in balloting in Pennsylvania by 2-1, guys.
And Devin, there's been a ton of confusion around voting this year. Just today in Ohio, one county said it sent wrong ballots to about 50,000 voters. New York is now investigating after a similar thing happened in Brooklyn. And an appeals court has ruled all Wisconsin mail-in ballots have to be in by election day, no extension. The dissenting judge station, back to our virtual roundtable with Rick Klein and Mary Jordan. Rick, you know, the president has been widely criticized for casting doubt on the integrity of mail-in voting. So how are these issues that we're hearing about now different from some of the things he warned against?
Well, he's taking anecdote and making it into conspiracy, and there's really nothing so far that is stitched together. The scattered reports that we've heard of mistakes often by people that are contractors, or what might be just petty crimes that happen to involve the mail, or even just accidents, and any kind of a broader issue that would undermine the integrity of the election or suggest that there is widespread voter fraud. There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud in this country. There has never been any evidence of widespread voter fraud in this country. What there is ample evidence of is a messy process like the one Devin is reporting on. You've got 50 states and all the jurisdictions that administer things differently, plus you have COVID bringing on a whole wave of different scrutiny, different regulations, changed state laws, changed court challenges, differences in how these are treated in every locality. And yes, it is messy, but that does not mean that you should not trust or rely upon a system that has thousands of professionals hard at work to make sure that this election is safe and secure.
Well, Mary, I'm going to follow up on that. There's mess, and the Constitution guarantees us a fair and accurate election, not a perfect election. But there can be mess that overwhelms that goal. We're talking 100,000 naked ballots in Pennsylvania, 50,000 in Ohio, and it's October. These are big numbers. Are Democrats looking at that and saying maybe we should rethink?
I think this is the most important issue that we're going to discuss before November 3rd. The vote, people died for the right to vote. And, now people don't know if their vote is going to be counted. But what I'm hearing on the ground is that's going to cause a massive turnout. Because there's nothing like motivation when you hear somebody's going to take a right away from you. And, department stores like Orbis, I'm getting in my inbox all kinds of people that I never thought were remember to vote. On the radio station all across the country, I'm from Ohio in the Midwest, remember your right to vote, remember what people did to get it. So I think that in trying to sow confusion and tell people, if you stand in line you might get COVID, if you mail it in it might not be counted, that it could actually have that effect. But when this is over, for sure, it's time that 2020, if we can send a rocket to outer space, we could get a clear and safe voting system. This is embarrassing.
I love that point, Mary. Rick, 4 weeks out, at least 6.8 million Americans have already voted. That's already more, 15 times more than in 2016. What does that tell you, and does this kind of voting benefit one party over the other?
Well, people have been voting early, and more often they're voting early for decades now. COVID forced changes to a lot of laws, made it a lot easier to get absentee ballots to qualify in a whole range of states for mail-in votes, and a number of states are sending in ballots, not sending out ballots to all registered voters. So I would expect the numbers to rise. I think Mary's right that interest in the election, the turnout is up, and look, it's a different country that's voting early versus on election day. We see it in all of the polling. You see it even in the early ballot requests. Joe Biden is going to win the pre-election balloting by a huge margin. In all likelihood, Donald Trump will win the election day margin, the election day vote by a pretty wide margin. The question then becomes how quickly everything gets counted, how news organizations like our own start to talk about those results as they roll in fits and starts on election day and possibly well beyond. Just because things aren't settled on election day doesn't mean there's anything wrong, but the mistrust out there is very dangerous. But yes, there's no question there's a big split in how people vote in this country that is going to play out in dramatic fashion over these next 25 days.
It will certainly be an election day like no other. Rick Klein, Mary Jordan, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But across the country, early voting's already underway, and millions have cast their ballots. We talked to some voters who showed up to the polls weeks before the election, and they told us what
I understood today. It's good to vote. They say one person's vote don't count, but it do. A lot of people say they don't want to vote. Why?
Our country's in a turning point right now, we can either go one way or the other. I just want to make sure that my vote gets counted. That's why I'm here early in person.
I really haven't seen this much excitement
since 1968. I'm actually bringing my mail-in ballot because I wanted to have the safest, most reliable way to be sure that I got my vote in.
People are interested in voting and getting their voices heard. Voting is always important, but specifically this year.
All right, hearing from our voters there. Up next, a scary situation in Michigan. 13 people now face charges in an alleged plot to kidnap the governor and start a civil war. We're going to look at where this ideology comes from and what the government can do to respond. Stay with us.
What you're seeing right now is part of the eye wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys. This is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source of ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop, original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
The Americans here on the ground in the Iraq. 18,000 tons. Metropolis. Ismail? David. Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael. You can see just hole after hole. This was your view.
Thank you.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. These are your worlds. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
We've had more attacks and more deaths from right-wing extremist violence than from any other type of threat, including radical Islamist jihadism.
But along the way, she says she received an unusual request by the White House.
They directed me that your prevention plan is good, we want to support it. We can't talk about it in the framing of domestic terror. We need to talk about this in terms like violence prevention. The message was clear that we couldn't talk about domestic terrorism at the White House.
An ABC News investigation found that since Donald Trump emerged as a presidential candidate in 2015, at least 20 people charged with hate-fueled assaults or threats cited Trump specifically in connection to their actions. We couldn't find any such cases tied to either President Bush or President Obama.
That was a clip from the new ABC News documentary Homegrown Hate, The War Among Us, which examines the problem of domestic terror, its origins, and its resurgence. Now, 13 men are facing charges in an alleged plot to storm the Michigan State House, kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and start a civil war. The men are said to be members of a militia group. ABC's Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas joins me now with more on this. Pierre, this is one of those stories sounds like it's out of a movie. What's the latest in terms of what we know?
Well, I just spoke with some federal sources who say today they're trying to exploit phones and computers that were confiscated in connection with the raids associated with these men. They want to know if other people were involved in supporting them. They also want to get a sense of whether there is any additional evidence in terms of the men allegedly discussing plans to kidnap a sitting governor and possibly execute her.
And what do we know about this group that these guys were a part of?
Well, they're described as two specific militia groups. We have to be careful not to call them white supremacist groups because that's still being determined. We know those types of organizations have elements of white extremism within them, but law enforcement officials are just deeply concerned that they have been active in their frustration about COVID-related measures such as wearing masks and closing down certain businesses like gyms. They were very concerned and angry about that. And the men went far beyond what sources would describe as aspirational. They say that they were doing surveillance was on a vacation home with the governor, went there twice, taking photographs and video of the home, discussed various things that could be done to start a civil war.
So something that was thought out and planned for. Pierre Thomas in Washington, very concerning. Thank you.
Very concerning indeed. I want to bring in ABC News contributor and former Homeland Security Acting Undersecretary John Cohen for more. John, thanks for being with us. You were featured in that documentary. What's at the heart of this problem, and what is being done to combat it?
Yeah, so there's a number of factors and reasons why over the past several years we've seen a reemergence, an increase in not only public displays of far right-wing, anti-government, white supremacist ideological beliefs, but violence associated with it. First, it should be just really, I should just be really clear. As the FBI director and the Department of Homeland Security have said recently, the primary terrorism-related threat facing the United States today comes from violent extremists who hold far right-wing ideological views. Again, anti-government, anti-authority, white supremacist. Those are the ideologies that are driving violence in our society today from an ideological extremism perspective. There's a number of factors. One, these groups tend to reemerge when the country is facing major societal problems, whether they be economic crime, we're dealing with a pandemic, anything that causes fear, polarization, discord in our society. These groups, these thought leaders capitalize on that. Second, it's the social media. These extremists can spread their views, they can connect people. Third, their ideas are becoming mainstream. You have a president of the United States, his supporters, who actually been promoting their policy ideas, been mimicking their language, refuses to condemn them. That's empowering to these groups. And they view his words and his tweets as a call to action, in some cases a call to violence.
Well, that's a connection I'd like to press you on for a moment. We see in that documentary some examples of suspects citing President Trump in connection with their actions. We saw President Trump tweet "Liberate Michigan," and we saw those pictures when the Capitol was swarmed with militia groups. Governor Whitmer says she's felt threatened ever since the president called her that woman from Michigan. Is that really evidence of cause and effect?
No, but what is evident that these extremists are hearing the president, they feel that he is supportive of their views, is their activity on social media. Law enforcement and others monitor these social media sites. We've had individuals who have posted that they view the president as their commander. We've had this network has reported on dozens of attacks and disrupted attacks in which the individuals who have been arrested in court have pointed to the president's words as their motivation. Look, I'm not sitting here saying he sees them as their army and he is giving them orders. I think very much of what he does is for political reasons. It serves to inspire and mobilize his political base.